Oh, we're good. We're good. All right. Good afternoon. Let's call the meeting to order. Today is the June the 6th. We're here at the Civic Center for the pre-agenda meeting. Our agenda has been published, and the first item is the motion to approve or deny the settlement which we discussed in our executive session, which is not on y'all's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? That's the first item, even though it's not listed on this.
I make a motion to approve the settlement.
Before you vote, could
Okay.
we maybe get a brief update on which settlement this is, and basic nature of the terms? Mr. Warner can probably provide that.
I'm sorry, Nick, I
Okay.
didn't hear that. I apologize.
Before you vote, especially since we had two executive sessions today, I would suggest that we get a brief update from Mr. Warner about which case this is and
Absolutely.
the basic terms of the settlement.
All right, Mr. Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your Honor, this litigation involves the case of Michael Duhart versus City of Mexico Beach. Mr. Duhart was a former police officer with the city, filed a Section 1983 civil rights action based claim, a race claim in federal court. Pursuant to the court order, parties engaged in a mediation process and arrived at terms of a proposed settlement subject to this council's approval, of course. The settlement sum of $87,500 plus plaintiff's costs up to amount of $2,000. That figure is actually $1,296.80, and the insurer agreed to pay the cost of the mediations. The funds are paid by the insurer, with the city's only contribution being its deductible, which I understand is $5,000 in this instance.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the settlement.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Albrecht?
Yes.
Mayor Kathy?
Yes.
And Mr. Putnam?
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on to what is now listed as item number 1 is the CDBG update from Mr. Dingman.
Good evening, Dennis Dingman, Summit Professional Services. First of all, congratulations on a successful election. And Mr. Putnell, sending me to Mango Molly's an hour before the meeting is probably not a good idea. Just have an update.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Of course, you know that the city has a CDBG housing grant, and that housing grant has been running now for about a year and a half. And so on May 11th, DEO came over to do their second and final, what's called the monitoring. So they audit the grant during the life cycle of the grant. And first of all, I want to thank Mel and Adrian for all the help that they gave to us as we went through that monitoring. The monitoring went extremely well. The agency is very pleased with the way the grant is being administered, and went out to see some of the homes, and he was very pleased. His name was Ted Court. So the city is in fine shape on the grant. We have currently, we have to do 9 applicants. We currently have 8 applicants. And one of these and we have a new applicant that will finish out the 9. And what I'm asking tonight is that that the council put on its consent agenda for in 2 weeks to adopt another applicant. She has passed the qualifications. Her name is Barbara Jean Geiger. She lives on 13th Street. If you look at your last page, all of that package that I gave you in yellow. Miss Geiger is the last applicant. And she lives at home, and it's some rehabilitation. It's not a new home, new roof, air conditioning, things like that. A new deck for sure. She has an existing deck, but it's rotted and it's unsafe. So what I would call a minor rehab. So it will be good to help her out. She is over 62. I won't share names, share ages with you all, but she is over 62. If any of you are related to Ms. Ergel, Barbara Jean Ergel, of course you cannot vote to bring her onto the applicant list. The reason I'm asking you to do that next week, I would normally be here, but I have a conflict. And I would rather not delay bidding out these last two jobs. I would rather, this is kind of perfunctory, there's no special activity that has to go on when you adopt someone onto the applicant list. I believe you all have done it before. So if that's not going to be possible, then I can always wait till a month or the next meeting after that when I won't have a conflict. But if you would put it on your consent agenda, I do appreciate that. One other thing that I might mention is the economy is improving. That's great. One of the problems, however, with that is subcontractors and manufacturers are over capacity. And since they're over capacity, lead times are stretching out. So we have asked the agency to give the city an extension on its grant. What does that mean? It really means nothing. They'll just extend the timeline, and we have to announce that, ask them early enough so that we fall within the guidelines of their procedures. And it doesn't affect the city's ability to apply for another grant the next cycle coming up. So it really is a administrative thing. And it's really due to the increased demand on subcontractors, contractors, mobile home manufacturers. Excess demand is a good thing, I guess. So I guess the status that I would say is that the grant is doing extremely well. We're on track. I can tell you that we had more applicants this time from the city proper than we had from the rustic sands. Okay. However, we had more applicants from outside of rustic sands that either didn't file their application, or didn't want to sign the deferred payment lien, which is required by the agency. Or we had one woman who was real sweet. She needed the help. She got a inheritance, and she called us up and said, "I can't do that. I can't take it away from someone else in the city. I'm going to pay for this repairs myself with my inheritance." So that was good to see that there was a lot of interest from within the city proper, outside of West.
So you're needing tonight one of your questions to us is to have the application list or just Ms. Ergel approved?
Just Ms. Ergel approved.
Okay.
I'm sorry, do
The
I have?
application list then is already, other than her, has been approved?
No, the application list is what I'd like you to adopt at the
At our regular meeting?
next meeting.
The entire list?
Exactly. And the
Okay.
entire list includes the addition of Ms. Ergel. You've already adopted the list other than Ms.
And that's the requirement then for disclosure about if you have any, just for Ms. Ergel?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right, so we need to add that to our agenda for next Tuesday. Any opposition to that, putting that on there? Okay. What else, Denny?
That's it.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, annual committee, annual committee appointment, Adrian?
All right, as we had an election and today's the first meeting, all three newly elected have been sworn in, and here we are. As we do this every year, we go through the list of our committees and appointments. Very little should change. Bay League of Cities, Mr. McLaughlin is currently on it. Bay County TPO is Mr. Wallace. The CDC appointments, Ms. Albrecht, we can't change that one. That one's done by the county. The Mayor Pro Tem is also Ms. Albrecht. Military Affairs was Mr. Bailey and Mel, and I believe that Mayor Caffey would like to take the place of the former mayor and take that one. So that one we're going to fill the vacancy. And then on EOC, that was Mr. Bailey as well, and I believe Mel is going to fill that place. And then also not on your list is we need to do the check signer approval at next week's meeting again, because it needs to be formal in the minutes with a motion and a second. And we had been doing everybody at the council. Do we want to still do that, or do we want to have designated check signers? And then any other changes to the list?
Okay, at the list as presented, is that suitable for everyone? Everybody good with that?
Good with you?
Good with me? All right, so that takes care of that. The check signing list consists of who? Everyone?
Right now, it's everybody but Mr. McLaughlin, because he was appointed and we didn't do another one. I was waiting until an election. And so that was, would be now remove Bailey, add Bill, and add the mayor.
Okay. And that's just but you say that requires because of the way it's set up?
Motion second in the
All right,
minutes.
well, you're gonna add that then to the agenda? All right, so we've got the check signed. Any other committee appointments? That's it?
I think that's it. I couldn't think of anything.
All right. Statewide mutual aid agreement? Ma'am?
Yes, Your Honor, we've got numerous mutual aid agreements with many local entities around the county and otherwise, but it was brought to my attention by Mr. Stengel that our statewide agreement with the state has expired and has been for some time. Most mutual aid agreements don't have a sunset, but the state one does. And so I would recommend to the City Council that we, at next week's meeting, approve the resolution of approving the statewide agreement. In case of an emergency, we may need state help, and this would allow that to kick in.
Okay. Is that just a one-year agreement?
It's one with an additional year thereafter. So it's something we'll have to look at every couple of years.
Okay. All right, now see you have that on here, on our on the agenda for the meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions about that from anyone? Mutual aid agreement with the state?
That'll go into effect as soon as we sign it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, medical marijuana, ordinance 668. Nick?
I'll take this one. The prior direction I got from the council was to generally work from the ordinances that have been adopted around the county already. I've done that. The Planning and Zoning Board has reviewed this ordinance. I'll give just a summary of, in general, what it says and how it differs a little bit from some of the other ordinances that you may have seen from the county and other cities, and then also highlight a couple points where staff and I are looking for direction still. So the most of this language, these various whereas clauses, they pretty much mimic what's in the other ordinances around the area. This is set up to allow cannabis dispensary facilities in certain locations. Those are the stores. There's nothing in this that would allow a processing or production kind of location. So the general rule we set would be that they can be located in general commercial, but with certain limitations. What you'll see from the other ordinances in the area is there's a 500-foot distance limitation to certain places. It's generally schools, public parks, daycare centers, and in the other ordinances you would see a 500-foot distance limitation from residential. That's something I had to change because the way our city is shaped, it's long and skinny. If we had a 500-foot distance distance limitation from residential, we, I think, wipe out the whole city. So what I did instead as a compromise is General commercial parcels are where it's allowed, but not if that general commercial parcel touches some kind of residential parcel. So at least there would be one other general commercial or tourist commercial parcel in between where you would expect to see a house and where you would expect to see one of these businesses. We've also excluded the neighborhood around, I believe it's La Siesta, is that right, Mel? That area is actually zoned general commercial, but it's fully developed as a residential neighborhood, so we pulled that out. And those are the general details. Obviously, if you have questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And as far as the item that we really need some input on, Bay County did not set any sort of limitation on how many of these facilities are allowed. Panama City Beach set a limit of 3, and I got direction that we probably wanted a limit but not a specific number, so we would want to plug in that number if you want to plug in that number. You also have a 500-foot distance limitation between the stores right now, so I don't know how many you could fit in the city to begin with. We've got county GIS working on maps for us, but it's fairly difficult to locate more than one of these to begin with, although it could probably be done. So that would be some conversation that Mel and I would appreciate, just in terms of whether you want to have a limit of 3, no limit, limit of 1, 2. I think you're well within your rights to set whatever limit you'd want, as long as you allow at least 1.
Where did this come from?
We had the GIS department from Bay County do that for us.
We'll certainly, but by the time you would vote on this ordinance, and hopefully well ahead of that time, have something that's parcel by parcel, easier to review. What that is good at showing is what these 500-foot buffers do, and the red on there is the general commercial. What it's not great at showing is within that red area, at some points there may be several different parcels there, but it just all looks like one red blob on that particular map.
Does the ordinance require a standalone building, business, or can it be part of another business?
It could be part of another business. If you're thinking about pharmacies, is that what you might be considering?
Well, I didn't know, I mean, I was just trying to, this map's confusing to me, help me. Where can you put based on this map, what areas are allowed?
It would be the red areas, those are general commercial areas. They're almost all going to be along US Highway 98, but not where they border on.
Which is where the circles are?
The circles are the distances from the schools and the park, well, there's no school, parks and churches. So you couldn't have anything within those circles. The idea is not close to a public park, not close to a church, not close to, if we have any schools or daycare centers, not close to those. But otherwise, the concept is you could locate one of these facilities on one of the red general commercial areas, but not if it's on a parcel that's bordering on the yellow residential low density, the orange residential general, or the blue tourist residential. Unless it's across the street from US 98. I didn't include that as border.
May I ask?
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to read it since we just got very late this afternoon. But based on the mayor's question, could it be in conjunction with another business? Could one of these things be in a Exxon type station, or one of the?
So what we built into the ordinance, and we can change this.
Okay, I'm just curious.
It's all wide open to be changed. The only real relevant limitations, other than the location in terms of the kind of parcel it's
Right.
on, would be that, let's see, there's no drive-through window service at the location, and that couldn't be larger than 2,000 square feet. So these are fairly small buildings. But otherwise, yes, I think it could be in conjunction with some other existing business.
Okay.
Assuming they held the right permit, which is not likely. Currently, there are only 7 licenses around the state that have been issued. Also, I don't know how recently you got this. We have a moratorium in place until I think September, so this doesn't need to be rushed immediately to a first reading. If you want to take a little longer to absorb it, understand it better, ask questions, maybe tweak some things, speak with Mel and I, and well, eventually though, we'll do 2 public hearings on this because it changes what's allowed in a zoning category throughout the city. So there'll be a fair amount of discussion before it would ever actually get adopted.
Okay, are there other questions? Or we need to familiarize ourselves with what we're looking at?
Yeah, so what you're saying that it would have to be in general commercial, but it cannot be next to residential, low density, tourist residential, and what was the other one you said?
Residential general, the 3 residential
So
categories.
those 3, it cannot be next to those 3.
And that doesn't guarantee that it wouldn't be next to a house, because sometimes we have houses built in general commercial, but it helps that situation.
Okay.
So there are places on this map that one could be.
Yes. We want to get you a better map, though, that will
Okay.
show you more clearly.
Are there questions? Anybody have a comment or question about what we're talking about? And I assume they have what we have? Okay. All right, so we're gonna sleep on that.
That's fine.
Okay. Planning and zoning recommendations.
First item on last night's agenda was the variance request that we will, of course, have the public hearing for next week. But to make a long story short, it was for a side setback in the area of Robin Lane. And it was approved by the Plan and Zoning to make a recommendation to you to approve. So again, we'll have the hearing for you next week and the final vote. We did have some discussion about the lot size, minimum house size, things of that sort. The only real recommendation that came out of that was we had looked at the normal average size of lots around the subdivisions as well as areas around the city. And they did make a recommendation to you to, at some point, have a 6,000 square feet minimum lot size in residential areas. That was the only recommendation that came out on last night, but there was a lot of discussion about parking trucks, boats, trailers within living spaces, which is what Mr. McLaughlin had brought up at the last meeting. He wanted to put forth a 90-day moratorium on parking in living spaces, as well as a moratorium on single-family homes made of metal siding.
Metal structures.
Metal structures and that sort of thing. One of the things that was discussed last night is we did have our contracted planner to talk about the comprehensive plan, and she was asked how to deal with this, and one of the things she had suggested was to look at the dwelling unit definitions and maybe kind of tweak that a little bit. But in the meantime, I've had discussion with Nick about going forward with a moratorium, and I'll kind of let him take it from there as to how to accomplish that.
The metal siding on the building, that's fairly simple. I would be interested though if you're talking about all 4 sides or.
Yeah, Nick, what brought that to our attention was a building that's going up here on Bailey Lane, and truly is a 4-sided metal structure with metal beams, interior, so forth. Would look more like a garage workshop for someone having their car done and so forth. Has no illusion of looking like what normally we would think of a residence in a residential setup. And that is the type of structure I would not like to see in our city, to be able to approve as a single residence in general for us to live in. Certainly, there are homes that can have metal sidings on it and so forth like that. But this looks like something that would be an industrial structure. In fact, it is an industrial structure.
So is it the overall design, it's not just the use of the metal siding?
Well, no, not just use, it is just the overall design that it is a metal building.
Okay.
That is not reasonable to look like a house. You know, if I was out in Howard Creek, okay. You know, I'm not trying to nail Howard Creek, I have friends out there. But, you know, if it's out in the middle of the country, I guess, okay, but I don't, you know, our city's grown.
So I believe we're talking about only for structures that are used for residential purposes.
Yeah.
We're not focused on business structures.
No businesses.
The overall concept of, does it look like a metal building is a little harder to define, but is it fair to say you wouldn't want any side of the building to have metal siding, or, because sometimes what you'll see is the
Yeah, I
front
know.
facade is something else that looks more traditional.
Haven't thought that far. This is a four-sided that doesn't even have a pretty front.
Okay, so for the purposes of moratorium, and we'll obviously have to get input from
Yeah.
everybody else, would you suggest for residential,
Certainly.
for a temporary moratorium on anything that uses metal exterior on
No.
walls? Just,
What I would suggest, I think there was a memo, or one of our citizens sent out some pictures, and Mel, if you can, is basically you'll see exactly what the building looks like, and that's basically what I would suggest a moratorium on, is that style building, if it can be done.
I'll have to take a look at the drawings and get a better idea of it. I'm trying to figure out how to
Yeah, I
describe
know.
the moratorium
I
so we
know.
don't capture more than we mean.
I don't want to in any way impede building in this city or anything else. It's just this one that
Right.
I would hate to see another one.
Okay.
Just that the, basically front door is a garage door.
Well, I have seen that plan.
Yeah.
Is that the same house, Mel?
Oh, this is a different one, but it's similar.
The other one looks 100% better.
I've seen the one that looks like a garage and given more thought to that.
This looks
Well,
like
it's
a
like-
garage that you could pull your car up to and have a mechanic work at,
It is a
literally.
metal building.
Yeah.
I mean, the plans, it has metal purlins. It's like you would build a warehouse.
Mhm.
Exactly like you would build a warehouse. It's designed by a metal building. It's not an architectural design building. It is designed by a metal building company.
Okay, and that's what we want to put a moratorium on for residential. I think
Please.
that's doable. Now, there's, I think, a separate issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, a style of building that, while it's fitted out in the interior for normal residential kind of living, pretty much the entire front of the house is a garage door, and it's a dual purpose kind of building.
Yes.
It's used for living quarters, but also at other times it's really used for storage of vehicles.
Yes, sir.
So that's a separate issue, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so maybe provide your thoughts on that, because I think I understand the metal building issue well enough. Sorry, there may have been other comments about the metal building that may not be something that concerns anybody else. I don't know.
Well, it doesn't look like a house. It shouldn't be in residential.
Okay.
It shouldn't, I mean, I want to just say, I don't know what happened there, but if that had been, how did that get approved? I'm just curious, could somebody, I mean, that's a, Mel, can you help us there? How did that come to light?
The one that is on, was it Fifth Street in Florida or Georgia, somewhere around there? That's the
Georgia.
one- Yeah, that's the one that I've got the
And that's
diagram
Fourth,
on.
I think.
Right.
I'm talking, okay, that one,
Yeah.
Route 2 and Bailey Lane.
Yeah, this one got approved because it met all the requirements that the building department had to have. In other words, it had the HVAC system, it had the bedroom, it had the bathroom, had the kitchen with all the faucets and all the amenities with that. And the garage door met all the wind loads that they have to have, and so did all the windows. And so we don't have a minimum house size in Mexico Beach, so it was approved as the principal structure. Now, the Bailey Lane one was a little more convoluted in that the owner is from out of state, and he is a contractor, and he wanted to build his garage first because he wanted to store his materials to build his house in there as he built the house. And we immediately told him, you can't do that because you can't have an accessory structure without a principal structure. And he said, okay, in that case, I'll just make in essence, his garage his house. And that's what he has done. It, like this one, has met all the requirements that the state requires and that Beau Creel requires in the building review area. And so it got approved.
This is Bailey Lane, this is the one on your screen.
No, sir.
Well, my comment to that is, in the future, if we're going to approve a warehouse just because we tell the guy he can't build it first and he can build it, then make it his house, that should have been, that's not a normal house. It doesn't conform to anything in that neighborhood. It devalues those properties. And that should have come before the council if somebody's gonna just, because it meets the building code, it doesn't meet Mexico Beach's conformity to the neighborhood that is in the comp plan. And that's my opinion, that's, and I am curious, by that getting approved, in 6 months, if he guts that and he says he's gonna build his house, what are we gonna tell him? He wants to build a house now.
If you're talking about the Bailey
Bailey
Lane
Lane,
one,
I'm just curious.
I told him that the problem you're gonna have if that's what you wanna do is that now that this is your principal structure, your accessory structure, which would be in essence your house, can't be more than 75% of your principal structure. So he's gonna have an extremely small home if that's what he wants to do.
I don't think that's what he wanted to do in the first place.
I mean, it's there, I'm not trying, but that should be a learning experience, that's not something that should just get a stamp because it meets the building code.
All right, I've been asked and will, should we get another application for something similar to this? It'll come before you folks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me provide a comment or two. I didn't see any of these previously, but the reason why Mel and staff and the building folks probably had to react the way they did is the same reason why we would put a moratorium in place right now. They're stuck with the rules on the book, even though they know something doesn't fit in, doesn't look right. So the purpose is we want to adopt some kind of rule in the near future, so we have something to point to on the books that says, no, the style you proposed does not meet our rules. It's very clear. It's right here. I think that would be the goal. The way that Mel described this to me earlier today, as far as the moratorium, would be with the eventual goal of during the moratorium. Moratoriums are always temporary. It's to have a little time to update the rules and not be in a position where I feel like we need to approve the next one. So the interest I have, and this is on the garage style home, I didn't know, is metal siding or is it some kind of hardy or something?
It's a
It's a
combination.
warehouse.
Okay.
It's called a house, but it's a warehouse.
Okay.
It looks just like a warehouse. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
again,
like a metal house.
again, let Mel send you the pictures.
Yeah.
We've seen it. Thank you, Bill.
So, all right, my question would be, I understand the metal building issue, but let's say that was made out of hardy and it was more conventional residential building materials. Do we still want to change the rules so you don't have a situation where maybe staff feels like there's a home that looks like a normal residential garage, but it's being used, like earlier we're describing, kind of dual purpose. It's living space, but it's also for storage of vehicles.
Yes, I would particularly like that for a couple of reasons. It's not characteristic to what we do have in the city, but also we are a fishing town, so I would envision a lot of times we would have a boat that would have tanks hooked up to it with fuel in it, that we may have fuel tanks that are pulled out and put to a side. And I particularly think, and maybe I'm wrong, you know, in most of our residences, we have something that separates fumes and so forth from our vehicles and the living areas for a health purpose to try and keep down any issues. And I think it is a safety hazard if we allow something to be built where someone can put in their motorcycle, put in their car if they really wanted to, but specifically something that could be a hazard. You know, I could see some young person in something like that bringing his car in and working on it because it's cold outside, and the next thing you know, we have a death.
So it's not necessarily the way it looks, it's the
No.
actual
Usage.
conduct of putting a vehicle inside.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a relatively nice building. I will give him credit for the one over on Georgia.
Okay. I want to look into that a little bit. I understand the perspective entirely. It wouldn't be very difficult to adjust the rules for certain architectural requirements to make it look more like a house than a garage if it's going to be used as a house.
And see, there's no partition again from the, you know, in most residences, you have partition between the garage
Right.
and the living area.
Because it's the interior of the home, it's harder sometimes to regulate that, but I totally understand the point you're making. I just need to look at it a little bit closer, read up a little bit on it, see if anybody's done something like that in the past.
And
Now, and I've not built a house, but the building box, the builder's box there, when I went through it, it had the big plans of a house and a little tiny page site plan of the rectangle structure. But they had the house plans in there, the big house plans in there. So when he comes to want to build a structure for his home, let's make sure that we follow our rules and say it can only be so much, it's an accessory building, so it can't be larger than what you already have. So we have to make sure that we follow those rules.
And is it correct that I'm still confused about the multiple homes. Mel, the one on your screen, has that been built already, or is that?
Yes.
So was it built out like interior space? It has normal kind of interior walls. It has all those kitchen fixtures, bathroom fixtures.
Right. See if we've got the board and batten outside, the wooden.
But the one on Bailey Lane doesn't have any.
It's the middle.
That one's simpler.
And the reason that I'm voicing a concern, I think we have an obligation to protect those that have come before this guy and have made an investment in our city in a residential area, and we owe them to be protective of not let something like that be put there.
With that style building, the way I understand the direction is, I'll prepare a moratorium for you. It'll be ready by next week for you in time to review it ahead of the meeting. And you can begin adopting that, and over the next several weeks, we'll update the land development regulations to ensure that that kind of building is not built in residential.
And, pardon me, one more comment.
Yeah,
Just,
sure.
Mr. Mayor, just for yours to know, since you weren't here, I'd ask for a limit on lot size. There'd been a lot of discussion in this with the citizens, so forth, about some lot size. And it seemed to me that, like some things, I'm not trying to stop things from happening, but if we could find a base level that's acceptable in the city for lot size and house size, it would keep issues from people coming in and, without us knowing, having a 600 square foot home or something like that, I'll use that as an example, that we may not like. But just, again, not trying to stop anything from happening, but something that would be within the city that we could say, okay, you know, this is as far as we really want to go on lot size, and as far as we would want to go as far as, you know, a residential home living area.
Lot size now is gonna be dictated by the plats. If it's already a platted lot,
Sure, you
Can't
talk
change,
about
you can't.
anything new. I think in this case that it brought this up, it was a new subdivision that was being broken up into some very small sized lots, and we
we're
had,
talking about,
Yeah.
not trying to go back and change.
no, no, not at all,
Can't.
not at all,
That'd
sir.
be difficult to do.
Mr. McLaughlin, I might have a suggestion that you'd want to
Certainly.
consider. The process to go through the moratorium, if you don't anticipate getting a few more of these in-house for applications soon, I could just prepare an ordinance to update the land development regulations that, assuming I don't run into anything confusing, that I need input from the full council on, it can be ready in a couple days for you, and you can just consider that for first reading next week.
From my point of view, I have no real problem. I was scared. I saw one that bothered me, you know, as far as the vehicles, and the next thing I know, I saw a worse one, and had not heard anything about it coming in until one of the homeowners on that street called me. So that's the only reason I was looking at a moratorium. If we can do an ordinance and get it done, hey, I'm for it.
We can get it started quickly. We don't have to do the moratorium. It just poses
You
a
wanna
little
look
bit of
at that?
risk that maybe somebody
Get,
would
look at
come
an
to
ordinance
complain.
and just see how it's written and what it says and see, yeah, because those are two obvious cases that need to be addressed.
I'll address the metal building issue, where you can put your vehicle relative to your home. I've got to look at that a little closer. I don't expect to have anything ready for that right away.
We're gonna send you a picture of it.
Sure. Great.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
It is.
You got it.
And in the meantime, if somebody comes in tomorrow and wants another structure like that, they have to come to the council
Yes.
for approval? Okay.
Thank you.
Comments? Everybody know where we're talking about, what we're dealing with, blah, blah, okay. All right. Miscellaneous? Have any miscellaneous? Go ahead.
I have one. I'm getting a budget calendar ready for next week's meeting to give to the council for the month of July, as we do every year. I just want to know how the council feels about how we did last year, where we did the marathon budget meeting, started at 9 in the morning and we went until we were done. Or do we want to have the series of night meetings again? Which way do you lean to have that done?
I know
9
that,
o'clock, but not a marathon. I don't know what, marathon, what are you talking, 8 hours?
It's about 4 to 12.
Well,
4 or 5. We broke for lunch, we came back and we finished that, so about 4.5.
It was 6.
Was it 6?
It was 6. I sat through it.
Well,
It's up to the council.
If we sat through it once, we ought to be better at it this time than ever, be shorter.
Hopefully. I'm looking at July 10th, Monday.
Okay, on the budget side, Mel, you asked per the ordinance, you present us with the budget?
Yes, sir, Adrian takes the laboring board and doing.
Right, but you give us a
Synopsis.
synopsis of the budget and a proposal based on what your staff considers to be
Correct.
the needs. Okay.
Yeah, the ordinance is clear that it's my responsibility to do that.
Right, okay.
I don't mind doing the marathon, and if we want to stop after 4 or 5 hours and come back another day rather than many nights,
Hopefully we won't have to stop and we'll be done before 4 hours.
that would be nice.
All right, I'll have that scheduled at next week's meeting, my report.
Other miscellaneous? Chief, you got anything?
No, sir, no.
Anybody from? Any comments?
I have one item.
Go ahead.
This is more to introduce a topic. I'm not looking for decisions or direction at the moment, but you've already done a first reading on a moratorium for new beach vendors. And just to clarify, this is not about leaving a trace. It's about whether you can go open up shop on the beach somewhere, selling and renting things, doing those kinds of activities. The purpose for that was, as I reviewed the ordinances with Mel, it became apparent that the processes we've been using in the past was primarily based on our peddler's ordinance. Didn't have a lot of detail. There wasn't a lot of structure to decide, well, this guy should be a yes and this guy should be a no. There wasn't really much criteria. So I've done some research and I've been trying to do the preliminary steps to start preparing some kind of more enforceable, more structured process. But the big picture issue that I need to understand a little better from you is basically what do you want the beach to look like? What do you want the beach experience to be like? If you go to Panama City Beach, they're fairly permissive. Pretty much any business can allow a vendor to operate behind it. Bay County is very similar. I don't even know if they limit it to just businesses. But that's really not the character of Mexico Beach traditionally. It's a little smaller, less activity, less businesses. So as I'm working with staff on this first draft of an ordinance, I'm just curious if you're looking for certain kinds of businesses, certain locations, maybe a cap on the number, just some general goals and criteria. Again, you don't necessarily need to provide any direction tonight, but that's the issue that lawyer and staff can't necessarily handle on our own. That's the big picture policy issue. So if you have any comments, great, or if not, just think it over and get with us at your leisure.
I need to think
Nothing
about it.
tonight, right now, I don't.
Yeah,
Well, I do.
we need to think about it.
I do.
Yeah.
I have some comments. I'm the new face here at the table. But I'm an old hat when it comes to what I have strong feelings about what I think our community should look like. We're a mom and pop business community. And the vendors that have been allowed in the past to operate on the beach are just mom and pop vendors. They're just, and there's only been, and I stated this earlier, if you look at what we've had, and by the way, it's worked beautiful. There's never been any problems. There are 4 commercial locations in Mexico Beach that allow, based on the rules that are in place today, where a vendor can operate. 4, I see. I guess in my eyes, when there's not a problem, let's don't make one. So if a vendor, if Toucans, for an example, wants to allow sailboat rentals, and the guy comes to the city and gets permission to do that, which is what the ordinance says he must do, then we already have in place, this table makes decisions about who can operate. Which has always been Mexico Beach's biggest asset. Local elected officials make decisions about what they want their community to be. That's always been that way. When we start trying to write it down, when you only have 4 locations, if you stick with what we have, I just don't see any reason to get to create something when I don't know personally now. This is my first meeting here, but I don't know of any issues that have arisen from other than leave no trace. And you said you want to leave no trace out of the mix. So when you have a little small town and people hunting something to do, and they got a place to maybe go rent a sailboat or rent a jet ski, and it's monitored by this table under the rules that we have, and I don't know of any issues unless something that I'm not aware of where somebody's all upset about the way we're doing things. I don't know why we just don't leave it alone.
Well, from my standpoint, I think that we should take a look at what we have on the books. I agree in general, it's worked very well, but I've also watched over the past couple of years, for various reasons, various things throughout, we find that we can be open to litigation. And I think if nothing else, we should have certain baseline standards on our books that would, you can't stop a lawsuit, but certainly we can, I think, do things to make it less available for someone who just doesn't like the 5 people sitting on the board and come in. I think there should be some basic guidelines for our businesses. We are growing, we're getting more visitors in here. I don't know if it would be included, but for our vendors, probably like I think Bay County does and so forth, they have items on the books of what basically they should do as far as insurance and so forth to protect not only themselves, but the visitors and including the businesses. You know, so I have no problem with looking at it. Doesn't mean what's brought before us, Mr. Mayor, has to be accepted, but I think it is valuable to look at regulations that we may or may not want to put in place. There's nothing wrong with talking. Right now, we are just the small 3 miles that we've been for many, many years, but we also have a very large piece of property across the bridge, and if the economy keeps going, it's going to also grow, and I can envision vendors on that side of the bridge also. So I personally don't have a problem looking at it.
It has worked fine in the past, really, because you haven't faced any legal challenges. The problem you'd have is if you denied somebody and there wasn't a very obvious, clear reason for it, you know, maybe they had really bad past conduct, they had criminal issues, something like that. It's hard to explain to a judge without any criteria, well, why is it that this guy got denied and this guy got approved? Is it just because he gets along better with everybody? That doesn't really hold up usually. But the 4 locations, I mean, that takes care of most of the issues if there's interest in approaching it that way, because at that point you probably don't make your approval process very discretionary. It's just if you meet the minimum requirements and you're first for that location, you're approved, and it's pretty simple.
I'd like to look at the verbiage just to, and I agree with Bill, and the 4 locations don't bother me. They're all commercial, but let's look at the verbiage just to make sure that we keep what we have, that we all of a sudden don't create another problem down the road, and I agree.
Yeah.
On the other side of the canal could open a can of worms, so let's be proactive instead of reactive.
So if we have areas that are zoned, let's say just hypothetically, somewhere that's zoned general commercial, doesn't currently have what we think of as a business on it, but in a few years from now it does, would that be a spot that you would feel would be appropriate, or do you want to focus in on locations where there's been some of this activity in the past?
I think we should be proactive, and if we have a general, commercial that hasn't had a business there, what would we want there? Instead of being just reactive to an issue, someone coming in and putting a volleyball park on the beach, which we may want or may not want, but all of a sudden we have to decide at that time and have to ask our citizens all of a sudden real quickly, what do you want? Let's take a look at it and just get some general guidelines out there.
Okay. And another question, any kind of businesses that you would not want to see at all? Forget the locations or the numbers.
Strip clubs.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, I'm curious, based on what we have criteria, we have stipulations.
For beach businesses, there's very little.
Well, it says that the business that had the owner of the business that has the business license issued through the city must write a letter and give permission to the business, the potential vendor. So one, you have, I don't think a business is going to want a strip club out there if they're going to run, I
understand.
You have a
There's some
layer.
private controls.
You have a layer of control right off the bat. If the business doesn't want someone, he's not going to write a letter for it. Then that business or that vendor has to come before the city council. So, when you're saying, what is it that, help me understand, what is it that we don't have?
What we don't have is something on the books that says why you can say no to someone in a particular instance. It's hard to survive a challenge on a decision if you're not applying previously adopted criteria and you're just making a personal choice about a particular application. Because yes, the way this has worked in the past, you get permission from the applicant owner, and then you come to the city council and you ask permission and you get a yes or a no. And we've, I think for the most part, received requests that all seem like what you would expect them to be. They seem normal, they seem fine. I'm just giving you the opportunity, if we're gonna play with this ordinance anyways, if there's anything in particular you don't want to see, it'd be better to put it on the books than try to handle it on the fly. And it could be hard to, you can always say no, but you have to deal with the fallout of having to defend that choice, and it's a lot simpler and more effective to defend it if you've relied on some legislatively adopted rule on the book instead of just making a choice at the time.
So we're
it
going
arises.
to change what we have now.
Well,
Are we going to expand that? Is it, or are we going to require, in what you're thinking, is the business that holds the active business license going to have a say?
So the only minimum thing I really want to do is to put something in our ordinances that tells somebody, if you do this, this, and this, you're going to get a yes because you follow the rules. These other conversations about what kind of business, where it could be located, how many, that's totally up to you. I don't need any of that. If we don't have those kinds of conditions, we might one day end up with a lot of businesses out there doing whatever they're interested in doing, which is fine.
Okay, so again, are you thinking that the business that holds the license, will they remain a necessary requirement for the applicant to even come to the city if they don't?
Yes, otherwise just any old person could just
Right.
grab a plot on the
Okay.
beach
All right, I
and
missed
try
it.
to set up. Right, yes.
All right, other questions? Anyone? Okay. Review of the draft agenda.
All right, it's your usual old agenda with the addition of CDBG applicant list under consent agenda. Remove the first reading of the medical marijuana ordinance. It'll have to wait till July with the advertising timeline. The second reading of the moratorium on temporary moratorium on new beach spending. The resolution regarding statewide mutual aid. Under other business, add the committee appointment and check signing. And also on the front page, the variance request isn't there. I forgot to put it on there, but it will be there. There's a variance request on Robin Lane from last night's planning and zoning meeting. As far as the ordinance regarding the houses, all that, am I putting that on for a first reading or not?
The metal building kind of houses, I can have something ready this week, and
Will I have it by noon on Thursday?
yes.
Okay.
Will it be acceptable to the council? We'll see. But
That's why I don't know if we're gonna wanna even schedule it for first reading with a day and a half to get it done without a review.
I
Well, we can always
Yeah.
look at it and say.
change it or no?
Yeah, I mean,
We're not,
put it on there, and if
Yeah.
it's not available or it didn't happen, then it won't happen.
So ordinance number 669 will be added for a first reading.
Okay. What about leave no trace? Are we gonna, we talked about that earlier. Are we going to, I'd like to put that on there and just talk about what amendments we want to
Well,
make.
if nothing else, we can get a list of things that our citizens are concerned with, that we're concerned with, that should be looked at.
I
So I have no
Been in
problem there.
effect for 90 days. I think we need to come up with the amendments.
It's
I don't
time.
know how, we don't need to keep looking at it. We need to decide what we want to amend.
Yeah.
And come up with that. I don't
Doesn't
see
mean we
any-
have to amend everything, but it doesn't mean that we should leave anything out either.
so if we
Take a
bring
look.
it, yeah, if we bring it up next week, pardon me? Okay, if we bring it up next week, but not make any decision because the public's not gonna have that much time, first of all, to know that we want their input. So pass the word. Anything, go back and read the ordinance and what you would like to see tweaked let us know. But let's start the discussion next week and then proceed farther down. Is that what you're thinking?
And be gentle to us.
Well, I'll be honest with you, what I was thinking was that we were gonna have a town hall meeting 60 days ago, and all of a sudden we didn't have one, and now 90 days has gone by and we haven't really addressed whatever it is. I don't see a lot in there that is available to tweak, other than the vendor exemption, the time. We absolutely cannot change the ordinance. I mean, I don't know what else, I'm just curious, what is this table?
I'm not sure, Al, or Mr. Mayor either, pardon me for addressing you improperly.
I answered it again.
I agree with you, but I think first thing we need to do is just see what everyone has to think. We know the issues that we've talked about. Certainly it's been 90 days, but I don't think another week or so, because we're going to have a workshop right after to just really start looking at these items that would be brought up. And I don't think an extra week is inappropriate for us to take a look at, for our citizens to step forward and talk to us.
They haven't been doing that?
They've been, some have, some haven't, but it hasn't been in a meeting, sir, that we've had all of the inputs. We've had some people that have talked to us almost every meeting, and that's good, that's okay.
So are you thinking that, Mayor, that next week we'll have our ideas and make a plan?
This table would have what we think we can tweak and still maintain the spirit of the ordinance.
So you're not looking for a town hall meeting?
Well, here's what I envision. If we come up with an amendment, and it has 3 items, that goes through 2 public hearings. There is ample time in 2 public hearings to hear what people have to say about the amendments that we come up with. And again, we're very limited of what we can amend. We can't, I mean, some are gonna wanna say, do away with it. Well, we can't do that. We know that.
Right.
But we can make just common sense amendments that are what's best for Mexico Beach. And during the public hearing process or of amending the ordinance, there will be ample opportunity for this room to fill up to tell us how they feel about it. It's not like we're gonna vote on it overnight. I mean, it takes a process, a public hearing process, 2 times. But somebody's gotta start by putting on paper what the amendments are. And until that happens, we could sit here and paddle this boat forever, because we're gonna get 1,000 different
I
opinions.
agree.
But somebody's gotta put on paper, here's what we want to amend, and if this table agrees on it, those folks out there will have ample time to tell us how they feel about that. But until something gets started, you know, the hardest part of any job is getting started. Well, it's time to get started, because Leave No Trace is controversial. It's obvious from the lawsuit. A judge has already said there's some issues. All I think is that this council needs to address what we think we want to amend. The ordinance is written. We can't enforce intent now.
You know, a lawyer
We can't
has,
enforce intent. What the intent
Yeah.
was is what's on that paper.
our lawyer, I think, said he's very close to having his thoughts on it.
So,
I would love to hear what he has to say also, Al.
What I'll be working on is to update the terms that the judge said were vague, but as far as any bigger changes, the kinds of changes that I'm hearing some discussion about, I would need your input. for
Would
that.
you look at putting any definitions in that you think from a legal standpoint we should do? For instance, I know you were talking about, and I think it's within what you've already looked at, but I'll use it, whether it's, you know, there's someone there watching it. You know,
The terms that were generally focused on and were found to be too vague were unattended and the terminology about the kind of beach. So yes,
Yeah, and any other, as you look at it, that you feel to protect the citizens, the city, and our vendors and everyone else, so that there's no misunderstanding of what a beach is, or you know, what an umbrella is, or whatever. If you would do that, I would appreciate it.
All right, so we could come back Tuesday night with nothing more than our ideas of what we think about amendments.
As long as we include our lawyers.
A lawyer's welcome, he's always done. But I think for us, we're the face of the community. What do we want people, how do we want to enforce that? Certainly, he can look at that, and give us guidance about what things that we would like to see changed. And if we need, I mean, you'll find me, quite frankly, I'm not big on asking the attorney everything that we do. I don't mind getting his advice, but I don't believe, I want this table to run the city.
I totally agree. The only thing I would be doing is strengthening what's existing, and if we're gonna change the basic rules, add exceptions, change the rules, that needs to come from you.
Yeah, I understand that there's whereas and thus, and I understand. But I'm just saying that until we get started, and the only way we're gonna get started is put it on the agenda and us come up with what we wanna do. That's the only way it's gonna happen. Any other comments? Any other additions or changes to the agenda? Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.